Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about special operations and the mindset that makes special operations forces so effective and efficient. And the first thing I want to talk about is training, because throughout special operations, doesn't matter what branch, we are exposed to situations and scenarios where everything is designed to go wrong, right? And the intent behind that is learning about yourself through those situations, through those stressful situations, learning how you're going to react. Are you going to freak out, or are you going to remain calm under that pressure, right? So in the 160th, we have a saying, death waits in the dark. Okay. And it's a badass saying. It's meant to be, intimidation to the enemy. And it is, right? But at the same time, the night doesn't care who you are, right? The night doesn't care how badass your resume is or how good you think you are, right? It's still a very dangerous job to be operating these multi-million-dollar helicopters at night and in these situations, right? So the reality of doing a dangerous job is that it forces you to master one thing above everything else, and that's composure in chaos, okay? And that's not something that is like genetic. That's something that's trained. And it's trained just how I explained, by putting and exposing ourselves to the worst conditions. That's why you see special operations selections making dudes carry logs in the mud, and, we shoot until our hands are raw. We do things for hours on end that suck and just are not fun. We're putting ourselves in these uncomfortable situations because the reality is there's missions that go to the 11th hour and beyond, right? And in those missions, we have to be calm and prepared to execute, even if we're exhausted, even if we're beat down. It doesn't matter. The mission still has to happen, and you still have to get the job done. So that's where that training comes into place. And the overall term for it is called stress inoculation. It's essentially exposing yourself to stress so that when stress comes up in a, fight or flight moment, a survive or die moment, you know how to react to that stress, remain calm despite all the chaos that is actually ensuing. Okay. And a good example of how we can use this and make it practical to real life is going to the gym, right? When you go to the gym, if you're working out hard, there's times where it sucks. There's times where you don't even want to walk to the gym. You don't even want to get in your car and drive 5 minutes down the road to the gym or whatever. But almost every single time, without fault, after you do it, after you're done with your workout, you feel good and you're happy that you did that workout, right? So it's the same concept, right? You're putting yourself through something tough, even though you don't want to, for the benefit on the back end. And that's how special operations trains so effectively, because you're constantly putting yourself in these high stress situations in training, so that in reality, when it's real, you've already seen it, or you've already been exposed to some version of it, right? All right. The next two traits, which are extremely important for these special operations units in general and for everybody to possess, are adaptability and humility. Now, that might seem pretty obvious, but egos can get people in a lot of danger, right? Especially if you have leaders who have an ego and aren't willing to take others' feedback. So a trait that I like to call it, it's kind of a hybrid, it's called humble confidence, okay? And it's the balance between capability and curiosity, because if you don't have curiosity and you're not willing to learn from others and grow as a person and an individual, then you're going to stay with your blinders on, and you're going to move one direction, right? You're not going to be flexible and adaptable like we talked about as an important trait, okay? So the best leaders I served with had confidence, but they weren't arrogant, right? They realized that their senior NCOs or whatever had more experience than them, and they were able to leverage and learn from their experience and take their feedback and their input when there were tough decisions that they might not have had the answer to. And that goes back to humility, right? You can't do that and not be a humble person, right? And especially in the soft world, when there's enlisted guys who have a lot more experience and time in the military than the officers do, but the officers are actually the decision makers. If they have that humble confidence, they're going to recognize that their NCOs, that they can lean on their NCOs, right? And they can learn from their NCOs because their NCOs may have seen this situation before and may have seen a negative outcome of a decision, right? So they may be able to bring that experience to the table. Now, how can we relate all of this to the civilian world, right? So let's relate it to parenting because it's a pretty universal thing, right? Nobody's a perfect parent. If you think you are, then I mean, good for you, but I'm definitely not a perfect parent. But what do you do when you screw up, right? What do you do when you make a mistake? When you lash out on your kids and it wasn't justified, or whatever. It wasn't the right time. Whatever. Do you own it? Do you apologize and do you learn from it? Or do you let your ego get in the way? And do you say, that was justified, I'm his parent, I can do whatever the hell I want, and not learn from it, so that when that situation comes up again, this is to the adaptability, right? Adapt and overcome. But if you don't learn from it and you don't have the humility to recognize you made a mistake, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to change anything, right? And you're not going to better yourself or your kid's future. I just want to wrap this up real quick. And if there's one takeaway, major takeaway, it's that you can be calm under chaos, but still human under pressure. Okay, what does that mean? That means you're going to feel the stress. There's going to be times when life is really stressful, right? But if you've done the work, the prior work, exposed yourself to these uncomfortable situations, then your body's a lot more resilient and a lot more willing, and your mind, and a lot more willing and able to overcome the stress that life is going to throw at you, whatever it might be. Okay. And then the second key takeaway is you can still be strong and take a break when you need it, right? Not giving your body and mind time to recover is one of the tried and true ways to experience burnout and chronic fatigue and chronic stress and go down a bad path, right? So having the self-awareness to know when you can push 110% and when you might need to take a break and throttle back to 70 or 80%, right? There's a lot of value in that. So I hope you got something out of this.